very grateful to have you here with us today. I want to also recognize some of my colleagues from the Center for Social Concerns who are joining us as well. Lulu Moyo, as usual, is going to be working her magic with the chat box and with breakout sessions and all the technical aspects of the Zoom session today. I want to remind everybody that the chat box exists and is a great place to be posting resources and comments along the way. If you also want to be connecting with anyone else privately, there's that option as well, or be posting anything for the whole group. And then also want to thank Patrina Keddick and Connie Mick for being here with us today as well. Appreciate them. As we begin, I want to recognize again the ongoing pain and uncertainty of so many in our community and nation and world as they continue to confront issues related to COVID-19 and systematic racism, including ongoing acts of police violence. We remember George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, their loved ones, and the many others who have suffered and who continue to suffer. And so with that in mind, I invite you to join us for a brief prayer to begin today's session. God of justice, in your wisdom, you create all people in your image without exception. Through your goodness, open our eyes to see the dignity, beauty, and worth of every human being. Open our minds to understand that all your children are brothers and sisters in the same human family. Open our hearts to repent of racist attitudes, behaviors, and speech which demean others. Open our ears to hear the cries of those wounded by racial discrimination and their passionate appeals for change. Strengthen our resolve to make amends for past injustices and to make right the wrongs of history. And fill us with courage that we might seek to heal wounds, build bridges, forgive and be forgiven, and establish peace and equality for all in our communities. In Jesus' name, amen. So with that as our context, again, we welcome you to our Engaged Learning Forum today. These learning forums, we've been holding them weekly during the summer around a monthly theme in general. This month, our theme has been a little bit different. It's been mostly special topics responding to current events and opportunities, including a conversation earlier about the return of students to campus in early August, and then our conversation last week about racial justice and community university partnerships. I encourage you, if you're interested in the things that we've talked about in these previous sessions, to visit the Center for Social Concerns website. We are posting recordings and summaries of each of those sessions over time. Our topic next month will be advocacy for nonprofit missions and funding. This grows from a number of comments that we've received from you and from others in the area, talking about how the change to online programming, distance programming, and just the fact that some things that a lot of us have been doing in the past are no longer possible for at least the next 6 months, maybe longer. And all that has meant that there is a new approach that we need to be taking to establishing the value of the work that we do, making sure that we're evaluating it well, making sure that we know what we're doing, making sure that it works as well as we hope it would, and to be thinking how to communicate that to others, including potential funders. So the focus is going to be on communicating purpose and value in a new context, including evaluation, grant writing, hosting online events, and things related to that. So in July, the topic again will be advocacy for nonprofit missions and funding. So I hope you will look for the invitations that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks with more details about the specific weekly topics that we'll be discussing, and hope that you can continue to join us. A couple of housekeeping issues just before we begin with today's topic. Again, invite you to spread the word about these events. We'd like to have as many people join us as possible, but again, they are meant to be useful for you. So join us when the topic fits and when you have time, but don't feel any obligation to attend every week, and come to whatever events will be most useful for you. Please also take the opportunity to provide feedback. We generally send a feedback survey after each session. So look for those and do tell us what we could be doing better and what features of these discussions you find valuable. So then with that, we have just two special announcements before we begin. First, we want to just note again that in light of ongoing concerns about COVID-19 and in an effort to have a responsible approach to that Notre Dame recently announced that classes on campus will resume in person on August 10th and will end the week of Thanksgiving. Fall break has been canceled to limit student travel during the semester. I want and recognize that that affects the ways in which our students can be interacting and partnering with your organizations. We are committed to be thinking through what those changes look like and how we can be supporting virtual engagement opportunities at this time. The Center for Social Concerns continues to be fully supportive of as many responsible and healthy options that we can create for students to be partnering with you and to be working towards the furtherment of your goals. Please do help us innovate and think about what is possible at this time. Second, the Center for Social Concerns is launching a special podcast series titled Speaking of Dignity, Workers on the Front Lines and the Common Good. The first episode is currently being worked on and is yet to be launched, but the focus of these episodes will be the experiences and stories of individuals who have continued to be at work during the pandemic, often in underpaid and under-resourced jobs. So the first episode, as I mentioned, is being recorded right now, and we'll focus on the experiences of a grocery store employee and a mail carrier. When we announced this, I wanted to let you know about this, both to just say we hope that you can find some value in these and to listen to them, but then also to help us know who we might include in future episodes. So if you have any recommendations or suggestions of individuals who might like to be interviewed as part of this podcast series or would like to be a part of it in any way, please do reach out, let us know. You can reach out to me directly, send me an email, and let us know if there's anyone in particular we should be in contact with. We can also be sensitive to any concerns about privacy or anonymity in that process as well. We hope to be posting a couple of episodes a month. So with that then, thank you for being patient with those announcements. And today we are blessed to have, I think, an exciting opportunity to discuss. So as all of us know, spreading the word about volunteer opportunities and then having any type of volunteer management software or strategies is an ongoing and seemingly universal challenge in community organizing and community efforts. Something that we have thought about a lot directly at the university, at Center for Social Concerns, tried to think through what we can be doing to help organize our students, to help connect our students with you and with your organizations. And so we've been talking a lot about this with other folks in the area, and recently the opportunity came up to have a conversation about potentially developing a community-wide platform that could be used by essentially as many people as wanted to, as many organizations as wanted to in the South Bend, Michiana area. And that would include nonprofit organizations, that would include higher education institutions. So Notre Dame would definitely be a part of that effort, St. Mary's, IUSB, and others. That's still in the very earliest stages of discussion. So we're not sure exactly what's going to be possible, but before we moved on any further, we wanted to come to you and have a conversation about what that platform can and should look like if it was going to be useful for you. So the conversation today is to talk about first the strategies that currently exist. You know, what is it that we're currently doing to track opportunities, to publicize those opportunities to volunteers writ large, not just university students, but anyone in the area who might want to participate in them. To share that information, and then to track who's participating, to communicate with those volunteers, and to think what would be a useful addition to those efforts. What would a software platform need to look like to be useful for you and for your organization? That would include features, and that's the primary purpose of today's conversation, but we could also talk about how to make sure that's a sustainable option, because we recognize that it's going to take then technical support over time. So if you have any thoughts about that, that would be welcome. And I want to note too, that this is, again, a first conversation. We look forward to coming back to the topics that are brought up today and to continuing to talk about this with you, because if we do create anything, we do invest resources It's going to have to be in something that's going to make sense for the community and for a long period of time. So I do want to make sure this is something that makes sense for you before we move forward any further. So with that in mind, want to just, as we often do, start out by splitting into some small groups, having some smaller interactive discussions, and encourage you to first take the opportunity to introduce yourselves to anybody else in the session, of course, if you don't know the people in your group. But then also would ask you to think about a couple of questions and talk about a couple of questions. The first is just broadly, what volunteer management software and strategies does your organization currently use? And we'll post these in the small group sessions as well. But then also, what benefits and challenges have you encountered in your current approach? So if we could just take this time to start thinking about what our, each of our organization's current experience has been, and maybe what we would like to see different or maintained in the future. We'll do that for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we can. Welcome back. Thank you for being a part of those conversations. I've got to say, I'm not always able to be a part of those small group discussions, but when I can, they're my favorite part of these events. Just the chance to talk with people one-on-one about their work and about what's going on is fantastic. We always like to start this last part of these sessions by just opening the floor to anybody who wanted to share anything that came up in your small group conversation. If there's anything you'd like to share with the larger group, be it something that was shared or a question that came up as a part of it. Anybody have anything they'd like to talk about based on those small conversations?
I'll put in something. I have found it very interesting just to see how the different colleges and universities in the area. So I was speaking with Gail from IUSB, and just how they're approaching the academic year and things like that is very different from Notre Dame. So it's kind of interesting to know and see that. And then I've spoken with Rebecca and St. Mary's to see what having students might look like, having or not having them as either students from a class or just volunteers. And I guess it's sort of like planning as though everything's a go because you have to, and then kind of thinking that, oh, this could all be shut down in a second, if something, so it was very helpful for me to talk to Gail.
Thank you, Lou. And just one quick note, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, just sharing your name and the organization that you're with when you start a comment, that would be great. Ludy's with Boys and Girls Club.
This is Rebecca from St. Mary's, and I was with Madeline and Allie from the Center for the Homeless and Hope Ministries. And it was really interesting to speak to them. I took some notes, and it sounds like Allie at Hope, they use Volgistics, and she finds it both, it's an online tool, and she finds it fairly simple but somewhat clunky. But one of the nice things is you can both create group opportunities and then individual opportunities. And also a nice feature is that you can have different opportunities assigned to different coordinators within the organization so that the kitchen person can be in charge of the kitchen opportunities. The other thing she said is that this Volgistics has the capacity, they don't currently use it, to track hours by having people check in and check out electronically. But obviously the hourly tracking would be tied to, that would require some kind of check-in and check-out procedure, which they don't currently utilize at Hope. But Madeline is a girl of my own heart, and she was like, we use paper calendars and a sign-in and sign-out sheet at the front desk, and she hates technology, which I also do. And so she said, y'all just figure this out and let me know what you decide, and then we'll do it. Which is kind of like, I'm with her on that, but yeah, that was kind of what she said. Is that accurate, Allie and Madeline?
Yeah.
Well, Madeline, we are considering having a 19th century, letter-based version of this, right? We can send letters to each other back and forth. I'm kidding.
That would be great. If you could just get like carrier pigeons to do that, that would be even better. I would prefer that.
Well, I am writing that down on a piece of paper somewhere, if I have one in the house somewhere. Appreciate that. Allie, can I ask a quick question? So what was the name of the platform you use again?
So it's called Volgistics, and it sounds weird. It's VOLGISTICS.
Can I ask, so you said that it was a little clunky sometimes?
Yeah, I think that's probably more on our user end as far as building the database from scratch. We've had a couple different users kind of tweak it, so some of the stuff is a little not connected, maybe, if that makes sense.
So there's some customization that's possible on your side?
Yes, you customize all of it, actually. So like if you're a hospital, and like you can customize it, and it's pretty shapeable.
So would you say that you like the fact that you can customize it, or has it just introduced challenges in terms of consistency within the organization?
So if I was more electronically data inclined, I probably would really enjoy that I could build it how I wanted it, but I don't really spend a whole lot of time on the platform itself to develop it a whole lot, because I'm more interested in having people sign a paper that they came and hanging out with them instead. So if you were really driven to be about building a database, you'd probably really like it.
Okay. Thank you. So please, if anyone else has anything they'd like to share, please bring it up. But I would also at some point just love to hear other people's thoughts about that question of customization. Would you want it to be, do you prefer something that's flexible, or something that you can just use kind of straight from the download, and just immediately not have to worry about, just learn the program and not worry about customizing anything, changing anything? So I think too, we want to be really clear about who's going to be using this, right? That, I really appreciated your term there. If I was a more data-driven or technologically savvy person, but I think we all have to look in the mirror and realize that, I wouldn't know how to customize things, right? So just thinking about who's going to actually be would actually use this at your organization, and would they be the kind of person who would want to be able to customize something? So if anybody has thoughts about that, or just any other thoughts, please feel free.
Well, I realized I didn't really address the question when I talked before, but the database we use, the volunteer database, is called Bloomerang. We switched last summer, and so it's actually a platform that our fundraiser chose to use, and it also has a volunteer component to it. I'm guessing the community groups like we do need to track volunteer hours for grants and funding and all that. So it's really helpful because you can identify groups by school or age group, or that they prefer to work with, or time of day or day of week and all that. So so actually it goes into this system when they complete the volunteer application. So we went from the paper application to an online volunteer application, I guess late last summer. I don't know if that's helpful, but like, for example, I could, if I wanted to, and if I'm keeping up with inputting data, I can pull up how many hours St. Mary's students volunteered in the fall. And we kind of need all that, for a lot of the funding and grants that we receive at Boys and Girls Club.
Great, thank you.
This is Emily and Elena from El Campito. One of the questions that we had about if anybody has been successful in uploading or doing like a background check or criminal background through a database, whether it be like an online application where they do it all electronically, so it's not like
link a limited criminal history check from the state of Indiana or something like that.
That's our question.
I would say Volgistics has that. It's a separate company that they like piggyback and auto populates your Volgistics database, but it's a lot of money, so we don't
Okay.
use that. Mhm.
Okay, got it. So that's still a separate process for most of you then, even if you have an online application or a database, you still are having to figure out and track those approvals separately.
And I think it's useful to note here, I really appreciate that comment, Emily, because I think that's really relevant for a lot of folks. I think it's useful to note here that while we are thinking about what we could create as kind of a core freely accessible version of this, right? We could be thinking about, what might cost them, because background checks, I mean, they do take resources to run, right? So we could be thinking about some potential add-ons as well along the way. We talked about this too, so I appreciate you bringing that up. What else?
In one of our conversations, not this one today, but a conversation that I was part of last week, there was some conversation about a more of a community-wide calendar aspect. Would that be something that as nonprofits you would find valuable? Or is that like too much?
I think in terms of a college student, it would be good to have a community calendar, because let's say you have, a morning off of classes and you're like, I did that in college, like Wednesday evenings, I always volunteered in a housing project, but I planned my schedule around it every semester. And so I think as a college student, if you had a free Saturday and you're going to be in town and they were doing, a special project at the Boys and Girls Club and they wanted to sign up to do it, then they would already know that information. There could be a link there so that they could get connected. I think that would, I'm putting myself in a 19-year-old shoes that may not go looking for that information themselves, but would have it accessible.
So Emily, I gotta say, are you putting yourself in a 19-year-old person's shoes or 19-year-old shoes? Because
either one, they're going to still be a little rocky.
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah.
I have a question. My understanding was, David, that you guys were thinking of doing a database of volunteer opportunities, and my volunteers are all retired, and I probably use 120 people volunteer at Forever in a given semester. And many of these seniors are the people that are volunteering at St. Margaret's House and Rings and everywhere, all over the city, at all times of year, whatever. And I would like something that was accessible for those people too. So I wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
And I get a ton of requests for volunteers because other organizations know that Forever Learning has all of these seniors that are active within the community. And we put out huge tables during our registration process of volunteer opportunities in the community. And organizations send us tons of information of, this is who we need, this is the kind of volunteer, this is, after school tutor, we would love to have, whatever. And then students, as they're looking through it, can decide what looks fun to them. they live to cook, so they want to do lunches at St. Margaret's house twice a week. They whatever. And I think if we could have that electronically, have a website, have a something, maybe even get the community foundation involved, and because they obviously are a clearinghouse for all of these not-for-profits,
Right.
that there could be a huge opportunity for people that really want to, or like Emily said, well, I have afternoons, what's available? Oh, I'd rather work with kids than seniors, or I'd rather, be outside. Whatever, and have it all in one spot. That would be very cool.
Thank you. And I think that's exactly what we are trying to think through. That kind of thing would be useful. So your comment is really helpful there. And I think too, I mean, as I've been thinking through what this might look like, and I think I hear this in your comments to this point, but there would be, you would want to have content that was publicly available for everybody to see. So if there's a common calendar, again, searching and trying to find an opportunity that would be of interest for an individual, but then maybe an opportunity to be connecting with another organization through the platform, share something with another organization, whether it's, because I think there's the opportunity database, and then there's the question of the volunteer information, right? So you have your volunteers that you work with, you have the information about them that you keep. And I don't want to, we're not suggesting that you would necessarily need to suddenly make all of that available for every other organization, right? I mean, we would want to make sure that everyone still had control over what they did with their volunteer database, their personal volunteer database, but then make it possible to share information across organizations as well. So it's kind of like, as I've been thinking about this, and let me know if this sounds right to you, it seems like we would have like that calendar with with opportunities that everybody could contribute to. And then there would be an opportunity for maybe an individual to create like a volunteer profile for themselves, to indicate what they're interested in, that would be shared, that all the organizations could look at. And then an organization would create a profile that, so if someone just says, oh, I know I want to work with, Hope Ministries, they can just go and click on Hope and see just a page for Hope, or for Forever Learning, or El Campito, or anything like that. Does that sound reasonable? What do you think about that as a general approach?
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Oh, well, I was just thinking about Paul Go, my father. And since he retired, he volunteers at Hospice House, and he volunteers at the soup kitchen at First United Methodist Church, and he volunteers someplace else, I'm not sure. And so like for him, I think that he has thus far done a volunteer application at these different organizations and a separate orientation at each organization, and separately schedules these opportunities with these organizations. And he's fairly tech savvy, although he doesn't care for it a lot. He sends me the funniest text messages, but he would probably, like, it would simplify his life if he had a single application or single profile that then he said, okay, I'm going to volunteer with Hospice, I'm going to volunteer with First United Methodist, I'm going to do this. And then, whatever the internal requirements of those organizations, I know he'd be up for that. He's done all of the training at Hospice, which is significantly different than the soup kitchen, but he could track, if he ever wanted to, how many hours and those agencies could track how many hours he's contributed to them. That's kind of what I was hearing anyways.
I was gonna say, that would be a huge motivation to get people to go to other organizations too, because their information's already there. And they're like, oh, I'm gonna go try out, Hope Ministries today, or I'm gonna try over here, because it would be one single spot. I was gonna say, my husband is a musician, and there is a website that's like that for people who need musicians at a gig, and then there's musicians that are already registered. It's kind of like that same thing. It's called Gig Salad, and it's a really funny name, but you can go on and pair up with what your needs are and who would possibly be the vendor for that event. So if somebody needs a string quartet at a wedding, then they're not going to pull for my husband who's a jazz piano player. It's going to be a different mix. And I think that's helped him get to different areas in town and people to get their needs met when they didn't know where the string quartet was. So I think that would be, if you have that for volunteers, I think that would be huge. It would make me want to volunteer more because that would be one spot to go to.
Absolutely.
Well, it would be like a Common App, right?
With one background check.
I mean, just like for college, yeah. See, I'm not sure. I believe Boys and Girls Club has to run their own. We have to run our own. And I do know, and I'm guessing someone else may know this, you can do a free like county check, I think. But we have to do, ours are kind of extensive, but I think that comes from national, from the Boys and Girls Club.
Ludi, are you saying you have to run your own background checks?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think, again, the idea would be, what could we do that would be kind of a common foundation that, just kind of basic information about a person, that profile on that application. And then if there was an organization that said, well, we need something more in addition to that, of course, you'd be free to do that on your own. But so we would need to talk about what that kind of common application would look like. But it would be a step at least. And I think, potentially a big step. And obviously this is going to differ for different organizations. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation, why I'm glad to see a mix of different people here, is that, larger organizations may have a different perspective on this than a smaller organization that maybe doesn't have their own tech support people. So I appreciate these comments.
Hey, Dave, I was also going to reaffirm what Ludi said. With IU South Bend, we don't accept, even if our student passed, a background check with Boys and Girls Club, we have to do our own. But I'm getting some ideas. It sounds like, I know I get a lot of nonprofits will ask me, do you have a student who can do web?
Exactly.
And so it might be helpful for the nonprofits if we could, when the students are completing their volunteer application or profile, they click the different skills that they have. So that way the nonprofits could look for the students with, are they bilingual?
Yep.
Do they have web skills? And then from the students end, Eve got me thinking about the fact that we should also probably organize the volunteer opportunities by subject. So if I just want to work with kids, but I don't know what the organizations are, or I want to work with the poor, or so I think as we're thinking about developing this, we also might want to think about the different buckets to put
Yes,
these things in. So this is super helpful.
Availability, if someone's only available on Tuesdays or Thursday, you know what I mean? That's helpful. And just to have, so, I mean, going back to the idea of sort of a calendar, it would be really nice to have a common calendar with all the fairs and community things that each institution in town or whoever, or partners, community partners, is having, because over time I've done pretty good at reaching out, and I think I have a pretty good idea. But if it were just all in one place, that took like reaching out each time, and it would be so nice to know, oh well, Reigns of Life is having this, like all on the same calendar, you know what I mean? This event that day, because maybe we'd have ours a different day then,
Yep. Eve, were you going to say something?
I completely agree. So then as I plan a special event, I know when Reigns of Life is, and I don't plan mine the same night, which I have done. And secondly, a lot of times volunteers are like, wow, I'd love to help, but I can't be there every week. Is there, a one-shot deal? And from an organization standpoint too, I need volunteers twice a year, and I need 20 all that same night, for that big event. And, that would be great.
Maybe that's how that calendar works, is like instead of the newspaper volunteer needs, You know, it just
Yeah.
kind of be that calendar, like here we need this and here we need this, or if there's the ongoing things, those kind of, it's that hub type of thing where they can see the different types and like at the newspaper, but just in one area and have everybody that's got everything going on at the same, you know, at one time, versus seeing real services come up or the Humane Society, there's spotted 1 or 2 or 3 in the paper at a time. This hub or whatever could be that one-stop shopping, you know,
Yeah,
with everybody
exactly.
having their organizational needs and such kind of listed, what their volunteers do. That would give them a good idea to, oh, they could cruise everybody, see what they like with all of us.
Perfect.
That's great. Thank you. I want to be conscious of time. So I want to just say one quick thing and then ask kind of a final question. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I want to continue to have some conversations with, especially with a few of you afterwards. But if you have anything you'd like to add to this conversation, please do contact me directly, because I think what we'd like to do is kind of compile all of the things that have been brought up here and then share it out broadly in a survey so people can indicate, yeah, my organization would really find value in X, Y, and Z, and maybe less so in A, B, and C. And so you can identify the things that would be of most interest to you. And we can get kind of a broader sense of where everyone's at with these features. But then, Emily, your comment in the chat box about making notes about volunteers brings up a really interesting and I think really important question. You know, is it like an Uber style evaluation that we're talking about, right? Do you give a volunteer a certain number of stars for their interaction with you, right? And that seems very weird. That seems very weird to say, right? But so I'm not endorsing that necessarily. I just want to bring that up as an idea, right? Would it be useful to include some type of evaluation or notes about an individual volunteer? I don't think we would want to get into the other way around with volunteers rating organizations. That seems like a mess just waiting to explode. But would we want to have something that could be privately shared, and not publicly, right? Wouldn't want anybody to be, you know, have a scarlet letter on their volunteer profile, but would we want some type of communication across organizations about individuals?
I think just a question on the form that says, have you volunteered at other places? And then if they put down where, then I can give Emily a call and she'll say, you know, great kid, but he never showed up, you know? Okay. And then sort of like a job reference instead of, yeah, because I think the liability there would be a little deep.
Yeah, rather than a public, even to us, saying like, wow, like Joe really sucked. Like no one's gonna want to have him. And this Joe kid, he won't know why. You know, I think like doing more of like, hey, you know, Allie, this guy volunteered at Home Ministries. What was he like? Doing more of like a call email system than like having a rating. Public thing, even to us in the portal, like, because we don't want to steer clear of that guy. And
don't know who Joe Buchanan is, but he's feeling attacked right now. He said,
I mean, your assessment of me isn't wrong.
I'm so sorry.
It's not an incorrect assessment of me, but
I am so sorry. And can we edit this part of the recording out?
I think we're pulling that part out as a meme and just sharing it broadly.
You were spot on. It's absolutely fine. I'm just joking around.
Okay, let's
Joe never shows up. Joe never shows up. Joe never shows up.
I think that you guys have hit a good point that a lot of it's going to have to be discussed in terms of privacy and what you're all willing to share with each other and what the volunteers are willing to share with you, and all of those kind of things are going to have to be controllable and discussed in certain ways. I think the job application checkbox is spot on, but then like you should be able to keep internal notes about the volunteers as well for yourselves, and that gives you that leverage then when someone calls to ask about somebody like that. But then, you know, do you want other organizations to see who's volunteering with you? Do you want to see what other organizations, who's volunteering with other organizations? And then like how finite control does everyone have over all that stuff, are all like details of a platform that would have to be kind of hashed out, I think.